I see everything that has a soul. I try to treat every single thing with respect.
But you're appropriating Indigenous culture to
I'm
justify
not
arbitrarily harming.
I'm appreciating Indigenous culture.
Hey Q, nice to meet you. My name's Ed, and today I'm at the University of Dallas with a banner that says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" You've been listening to a conversation I've just been having.
Yes.
And it seems like you have some questions or some ideas or thoughts. So let me know what you think.
So my first question for you is, what is your opinion on the native tribes such as the Inuit who live up in Alaska who don't have easy access to these fresh produce that you're wanting them to eat and instead rely on the animals they hunt?
Yeah, well, the issue of what we do to animals is an issue of necessity. This question of veganism comes down to the options and choices that we have. So there are obviously people in the world who don't have the availability or the access to be plant-based or to be vegan, who are maybe in tribes and in indigenous communities where they don't have the access that you and I have, where we live with the means that we have. And so as a consequence of that, the morality of that situation is very different because they hunt animals and eat animals out of necessity. But the point of me being here with the banner about why aren't you vegan yet is to draw on the fact that it's about you and I and the situation that we have and the means that we have, which is why it becomes a moral issue for us.
I mean, you talk about, us like we are not part of these indigenous tribes. I mean, these indigenous tribes, yes, they live, out remote away from, civilization, but many of them, they don't see veganism as they don't want veganism because they...
What about you?
I don't want to be vegan.
And why don't you want to be vegan?
Because, one, I have I'm a neurotic, which means I'm very sensitive to certain things, so I already am, picky about what I eat. And so trying to find a substitute for the nutrients that I need is very risky. So eating meat that I know, meat that I understand, it helps me that way. However, with these indigenous tribes, because you have to understand, veganism is very much a white colonized thought. It very much is.
Well, people say that, but then also people say that when you look at the roots of non-harming animals for diets, it's deep-rooted in places like Hindu cultures and Jainist cultures. And so the idea of abstaining from eating animals is very much deep-rooted in kind of Buddhist, Hindu and Jainist cultures, and not necessarily in a white colonialist process, at least.
Yes, but in Hinduism, they don't eat cows. They believe cows are sacred, but they eat other meats.
Well, not many don't, and historically many haven't as well. So I'm just saying that it's not strictly true that this idea of non-harm to animals is a strictly white colonialist thought. So I don't know if that holds up historically speaking.
Yeah, historically speaking, it's not. But this sudden boom of veganism is historically colonial.
What do you mean by colonial in this context then?
I mean colonial as in the white colonizers, as in the Europeans coming colonizing half the world. I mean the Americans colonizing the West. There's a recent surge in, white liberals who believe they're doing good and who believe, such as, you and I. And I'm not saying vegan is bad. Veganism is not bad. If you want to be vegan, be vegan.
Yeah, cool.
But when it comes to pressuring other people who don't want this and who have different beliefs. For instance, are you aware of the view of cosmocentrism?
No, you explain it to me.
So cosmocentrism is a worldwide view believed by many of its indigenous tribes in which everything is equal to each other. Me, you, the trees, the grass, the water, the rocks, the animals are all equal to each other. And animals hear us and they understand us. And so with many people, such as the not the Inuit tribe, there's another tribe in Alaska, starts with a K, I can't remember at the moment. They believe that the earth was made by the raven. Their god, to put it in terms, is a raven.
Yeah.
But they hunt elk and they hunt moose. Yeah. But they don't just hunt them, they respect the animal. They take everything from the animal and they thank the animal. Yeah. And they thank the animal in several ways. They don't talk about hunting moose. They just say, I'm gonna go out. Because they know the moose hears them. And if they say, I'm gonna go hunt moose, the moose hears that and says, they are not worthy to have me.
Oh, okay.
They are not worthy to eat me. Yeah. And so it hides.
Because they presumably don't want to be killed if they're going to be alerted to that. But the point that I'm making is that I'm not in those areas of the world talking to indigenous people in those areas. I'm talking to people here. And whilst we may make the argument that when we look at the rise of veganism as a popular cultural thing, it's kind of emerging from places in Europe, Australia, and the US. Actually, when you look at the growth rates of veganism, in America, one of the biggest demographics in terms of adopting veganism are African Americans. And so to make the claim that it's a strictly white colonialist thing doesn't hold up, especially as white vegans aren't going to indigenous communities in Alaska and aren't trying to impose that on them. I'm here in Dallas talking to people like yourself.
Physically, but through social media, there has been a push of people saying, you know, Inuit tribes who hunt beluga whales, which are not endangered in any way, people are saying that's wrong, you can't do that, and they say that is our only source of nutrients.
But at the same time, what can be easy to do, especially when we have views about a certain group of people, is we can take people from that group who kind of maybe portray views that could be considered extremist or views that could be considered impractical, and we can use those to try and almost, caricature the whole movement itself. And so I'm not going to disagree that there are certain vegans who will make that claim, but by and large, most vegans, including myself, have a more of a nuanced understanding that there are people in the world who have a different relationship based on the environment that they live in, and hence I'm not going to make the claim that people who are hunting belugas out of necessity to survive should be held to the same moral standard that you and I can with the choices that we have. See, that's what's important.
You say moral standard because you're saying that them hunting beluga is morally wrong.
No, I'm saying in a situation of necessity, it's different. Like with humans, if I said, shooting a human is morally wrong, it is. But if you have to shoot a human out of necessity, then it becomes morally justified. So I can say harming an animal is morally wrong, but if you have to harm the animal to survive, then it can become justified. So issues of morality are always nuanced based on those circumstances. But by and large, the general rule should be, if we can avoid causing unnecessary harm to someone, morally speaking, we should try to pursue that option. What do you think about that?
I mean, I fully agree. Yeah. And so my question is just, why are you here asking these people why we're not vegan? What is your reason for that?
Because it's a thing that we don't often think about. It's an idea that most of us don't kind of consider when we're buying food. And most of us in society are against animals being unnecessarily harmed. And so morally speaking, we already agree that reducing suffering for animals is morally preferable. But when we go into a supermarket or onto an ordering app or whatever and we buy food, we don't really think about the process of what we're supporting because, it's culturally normalized. We've been raised with that. And so the purpose of me being here isn't with this kind of naive opinion that everyone's going to sit down, agree with me and be like, hey, I'm going to be vegan now, but it's to try and maybe ask questions and talk about topics that people maybe haven't considered, and to try and get maybe a deeper reflection on those values and ideas, because it is a moral issue, and morally we do agree with reducing suffering. It's just that we haven't always thought about the suffering that occurs for our food that we consume.
Okay, so I know, because I was raised in the Texas education system. I'm sure many people here were.
I'm sure.
We were all taught high school, health class or whatever, how fast food was made, and they show us the slaughter camps and all of that of the animals and whatnot, and they try to traumatize us and whatnot, and they're like, don't eat fast food, that's why you only eat real meat and whatever. But then they don't say that that exact same process happens for real meat. So one, that's a whole issue, but you have the plant-based produce, right? You have, who is growing this plant-based produce? It's immigrants who are undocumented, who are being paid cents a day they are being exploited on their own reason. Yes, animals are being exploited and they're being harmed, but so are humans. And so you saying that, what's, morally, overall better to have plant-based, that's also it's a gray area, because you're also furthering harm on these people.
So we have a very imperfect system, not just agriculturally speaking, but just generally speaking. There is a huge amount of exploitation that happens in all different systems, and that's unfortunately a thing that needs to be challenged. So I will never say that veganism is perfect, that plant-based production is perfect. It isn't. What it is it's a reduction of harm. And the reason it's a reduction of harm is because everything you just described in terms of what's happening to humans happens in the animal farming industries as well. It's the same people growing the feed for the animals. It's the same people working in the factory farms and undocumented migrants. And it's those people working in slaughterhouses. And slaughterhouse work has been shown to increase rates of PTSD, mental health problems, suicide, drug and alcohol abuse. So the situation of animal farming also causes intense human suffering, and in many ways the same, and also with an add-on of what happens in a slaughterhouse. So it's a reduction of suffering, but it doesn't mean we should stop there. We should challenge that, and what we need is a plant-based food system that takes out the animal suffering and challenges that suffering of humans as well, to create a fairer system for everyone.
I agree. But have you considered going about it perhaps the other way? Saying, we need to focus on humans first. We need to focus on getting these undocumented immigrants, one, that, making them welcome in this country, giving them fair pay, giving them fair rights, all of these things, making them not fear being deported, because then once you get their support, they'll be much more likely to help us in reducing the harming of animals. They'd be able to help us, say, to go on strike against these slaughter facilities. It's all about how you go about things. Yes.
We can do both at the same time, though, is the argument I'd make. But we can tackle this animal exploitation and the human animal exploitation at the same time and create a system which is growing plants which is best for animals and takes into consideration the rights these humans deserve, so that we create a fairer system for everyone.
In a perfect world, we can go about it at the same time. This is not a perfect world, and that it would be an incredibly difficult thing to do. And so,
but it's incredibly difficult, whatever, so we might as well try to do that. And the first thing we can do is abstain from the animal products, and then with our time, if this is something like you yourself clearly care about and for a righteous and just reason, we can take out the animals and then campaign to create accountability for farmers to make sure that they're treating humans right. Of course it's going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge whichever route we take, so let's take the route that gets us to where we want to be for the benefit of everyone.
I mean, either way, you're going for the benefit of everyone. That way is just your worldview. You are wanting to help the animals first and then humans second.
We can do both at the same time.
Yes, but you are deliberately going animals first, slaughterhouses, then to the agricultural plants. It doesn't matter if you are also helping humans in that slaughterhouses. Your main focus is those animals, is it not?
My main focus is to create a better agricultural system for everyone, and veganism is that, because veganism isn't just about consuming plants, it's about creating a system that reduces exploitation, and that's not just to non-human animals. So as a vegan, I wouldn't be, if we had a situation where it was just plant-based agriculture, but everything you're describing still exists, well, as vegans, I would hope, and I certainly would as a vegan, think, well, this isn't where we want to be. So I'm not saying that it's about just animals, I'm saying it's about humans as well. But we shouldn't just say, hey, let's try and help the humans in slaughterhouses, but not help the animals in slaughterhouses, when we can help animals and humans in slaughterhouses by not paying for it and then help those workers.
You don't get plant-based products from those type of companies? Do you know those companies that do that? Are you avoiding that, or are you still buying from those companies?
Well, the supply chain is murky, isn't it? And so I can't sit here and say honestly that I don't pay for that to happen, because I can't honestly say that. But that doesn't mean that I agree with it. And if I had the choice in front of me in a supermarket to say, hey, this comes from here and this comes from here, if I had that choice, I would buy that. But we don't have that choice yet, because the supply chains are so, ubiquitously bad. So we need to challenge that as well.
Meat-based products. There are companies that do that, but there are also companies that don't. There are organically grown.
But they still cause harm. They still end up in the same slaughterhouses. They're still killed in the same way.
No. I'm talking about those that are like very local, very.
Yeah, I know.
They kill animals again in a humane way. Again, the idea is that.
But what does humane mean? When we say humane.
If you kill them in a humane way where they don't feel pain, in a halal way, right? They don't feel pain, where they are cooked a certain way, right? They don't have any added stuff, any non.
But what is halal? How do they kill animals halal?
They kill them without pain.
How describe the process?
I could not tell you specifically because I am not Muslim.
But you can tell me that they die without pain, but you can't tell me how they're killed.
Yes, because I have Muslim friends and I ask them, I'm like, what does halal mean? They say basically they're killed in a very specific way where they, as less pain as possible.
Can I tell you how they're killed? They have their throats cut, but they're not rendered unconscious. So they're conscious and they have their throats cut.
Is that how they're killed in the halal way?
Yeah, kosher and halal, that's what it means.
But, okay, so again, that's all about anatomy.
Do you think that sounds compassionate?
It's more compassionate than other ways of killing them.
It is, but is it more compassionate than not killing them?
They're gonna. The base of the problem is, if you have respect for the animal, right?
Can you respectfully cut their throat for an unnecessary reason?
That's what Indigenous people do. Indigenous people hunt in a respectful way.
But people who buy meat from slaughterhouses when they don't have to.
People from slaughterhouses, no. But again, if you go from organically sourced, small, very small companies, their meat is expensive because they are so small. But
they're still killed in the same way, though. They may be raised slightly different, but they're still killed in the same way. The standards still apply. Halal, kosher, or even just the USDA, humane regulations. It's the same in all slaughterhouses.
Yeah, but Yeah, so they're raised in the same way. They still are able to have a better life. They're able to go out in the pastures and they're able to live life as a cow.
But they're still killed in a slaughterhouse.
But you can kill them. I'm saying you can kill them in the cosmocentric worldview. You can kill them in a respectful way, where you thank the animal. Where you
does that help the animal? Does us thanking the animal
in a
help the
cosmocentric worldview? Yes, it does.
But would it not be better just to eat the plants?
No, because
so morally there's no difference.
Has to remain balanced. So if
there's no balance in animal farming. Animal farming destroys balance. It destroys the environment. We're artificially breeding animals into existence. We're selectively breeding them, giving them hormones, and then we're killing them in slaughterhouses. But we're talking about slaughterhouses right now.
I'm not talking about slaughterhouses. I'm talking about locally grown ranches,
which
right?
still go to the same slaughterhouses.
They do not go to the same slaughterhouses, my dude.
They do. They may be raised differently, but they're killed in the same ways. They're killed in the same methods with the same techniques. They're killed in the same ways,
but they do not go to slaughterhouses. They stay at the ranch. These are their own meat suppliers. They grow and kill their own meat.
They may have local slaughterhouses, but it doesn't matter. They're killed in the exact same way. They may not go to some of the big industrial Smithfield slaughterhouses, but they're still killed in the same way. And for that individual animal, the experience that they endure is the same because the method and the action is still the same.
The action is still the same, but it's, again, least pain as possible, so they're cutting the throat at the right place where the cow, honestly, just falls unconscious. They don't feel...
They bleed out. And are we saying that... Is it compassionate to unnecessarily kill someone else? Is that compassionate?
Someone else? No, it's an animal.
But we're animals too.
We are animals too, but we are different from animals in that we have conscious thought.
So do they. They're conscious. And if they're not a someone, what are they? A something?
They are something that... See, that... I'm trying to explain with cosmocentric worldview and with animism, right? Again, something indigenous people... most indigenous tribes believe in, there is a difference, right? You know, we have to understand that the indigenous people, they were doing this before us.
But I'm not so interested in indigenous people. I'm not interested in people in those scenarios. I'm just talking about the everyday person.
It doesn't have to be in their scenarios. I myself am trying to follow the cosmocentric worldview, and so I only try to buy meat products that were sourcely grown, raised, and slaughtered here, right? So I know that they living their full life, they were not stuck in 2x2 pens or whatever, but they were still respected, right?
But they don't live their full life. They're killed, cows can live to 20, 25, they're killed at 12 to 24 months. And respect is a mutual thing. When you sat down with me, we've had a respectful conversation because we've listened, we've engaged with each other. We haven't shouted over each other, we haven't cursed, we haven't been nasty, and that's respectful because it's a mutual. I'm trying to understand your thoughts and your feelings, and I feel like you're reciprocating and doing the same for me. But what we do to animals isn't respectful because it's a non-consensual thing. We force them into these environments for something that we want.
Not necessarily non-consensual. Again, with the cosmocentric worldview, the moose will gladly give himself up to the hunter.
But does the cow gladly walk into the slaughterhouse and present their throat?
No, technically, no. But a cow is different from a moose in that they are domestic,
sure,
right?
But they're still sentient. They still have feelings. To domesticate just means that we've kind of given them certain traits to make them more passive, so we can farm them. But they're still inherently the sentient, conscious beings, just like the moose and the elks and other animals in the wild.
Yes, but it's hard to explain if I don't have my notes with me, but there is that nuanced difference that many indigenous tribes have followed. You have, for instance, the Comanche tribes, right, who hunted buffalo or the bison. They hunted them, some could argue, in an inhumane way. They would chase them off cliffs. They would kill them. They would feel harm, but they still thanked the animal. They still took everything from that animal. If we took everything from the cow and put it to use instead of just taking the meat and throwing the rest away,
we don't. We boil the bones down, turn it into gelatin. We do use everything. We use blood and make it into different things. So we do use everything from the animal. But that issue of respect, again, I think you can do something more respectfully when you have to, which these indigenous tribes, they have to. But for most people in society, they're paying for animals to be put into a slaughterhouse when they don't have to. And these things are being done to these animals, and it's not consensual. They don't willfully walk there. So it's an unnecessary action that doesn't need to take place by the virtue of it being unnecessary. And we have an option that reduces that harm that we can cause. And that's the primary argument I'm trying to make, that we have a choice. We have choice. And when people have choice, that's when these issues become moral issues.
So would it be different if I were to say, grow my own chickens and kill my own chickens and eat them?
No, because we're still killing them. We're still taking their life from them when we don't have to. So whilst that system may be preferable for the chickens up until the point that they're killed, that point still has to arrive. And that point is when it becomes an immoral thing because you're needlessly taking their life from them.
I'm not needlessly taking their life. I gotta eat.
But you don't have to eat them.
That can be argued, right?
Well, no. For most people, it can't be argued. That's the point. For most people, it can't be, and that's the point I'm making. For most people, they don't have to cut the throat of the chicken. They could just eat something else instead.
Yeah, okay, if you don't want to eat meat, don't eat meat, all right? That's the fair thing. But you trying to, you say broaden the horizons of these people, but really you're wanting to make them feel guilty for consuming these meat products.
No, I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. I'm just having a conversation where I'm asking people why they're not vegan and trying to establish their views on it. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm just trying to ask questions and respond to your questions that are authentic to my feelings and in a way that potentially allows us to reach some commonality, which I think is important here. So I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, but interestingly, guilt is an emotion which comes from the sense of morals. If we feel guilty about something, it comes from the sense of there's something to feel guilty about. If I pick up a rock and throw the rock on the floor, I don't feel guilty. If I pick up a piglet and throw a piglet on the floor, I do, because I recognize that action is causing harm, and that's why I feel guilty. So guilt can often be a powerful emotion in helping us determine how we view something when it comes to that being right or wrong.
Last thought before I go to class. You're talking about picking up the rock, throwing it on the ground. Indigenous people see that rock as a soul. It has a soul,
sure.
Right? And so they also would not pick up a rock and throw it on the ground.
I'm not saying that I would do that, but I'm just saying that I would feel less guilty because I recognize that action causes less harm. And the feeling of guilt that you have comes from the concept that there's a notion of harm being inflicted.
So what I would encourage you to do is to look into Cosmocentric worldview and to look into how these Indigenous people have lived their lives thousands of years before we have come to them, and recognize how they were able to hunt, but in a way that's a community. They bring the community together in a way that honors the animal, in a way that even with the cow, the domestic cow, they do it in a way that honors the animal. Even if they're being killed or not, the animal is giving up its life for us. We are thankful for that animal for giving us its nutrients.
Indigenous people that have to hunt to survive, I have no bones with. I'm accepting that people have to do that to live. So, like I've said, and just want to say right again at the end, the situation I'm describing is not the situation I'm here to oppose.
No.
I'm asking people at this university in Dallas why they are vegan, because they're not an Indigenous person in Alaska who has to hunt to survive. They're a person who is paying for an animal to be unnecessarily killed.
It's not about, what I was describing then can be here at UTD Dallas. That's what I personally try to do. I see everything that has a soul. I try to treat every single thing with respect.
But you're appropriating Indigenous culture to justify arbitrarily harming.
I'm appreciating Indigenous culture.
But going into a supermarket and buying a piece of steak has nothing to do with that, because they're going through a whole process that's predicated on their survival, whereas us, we're not doing that. So going into a supermarket and buying a steak is nothing like what they're doing. The only thing is an animal has died, but in that situation it's justified, but in this situation it isn't.
I gotta get class.
Okay. All right, thanks so much, Q. Have a great day.